So, welcome back to the final breakout session in the technological track. And this time it's Brandon Falkowski speaking about responsive web design and mobile strategy. And while we were preparing for Imagine, I always got the previews of the slides, and it was like, he's got this huge wealth of information about this whole area of web work. So it's been great to see how much information he was able to compress into this, half an hour. So I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy what he's got to offer, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for being here, and yeah, enjoy.
All right, thanks, Vinay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be the last tech session that you're probably going to have to sit through. I'm Brendan Falkowski, and today I'm going to talk about mobile-first responsive design for e-commerce. First, let me briefly explain what I do. I founded a small web strategy and design studio called Gravity Department. And a lot of people at the conference have been asking me, what exactly does the Gravity Department do? My work is split about 50-50 between client services and products like Acumen, which is the best-selling Magento front end on an open marketplace. And that means I wear a lot of hats on any given day. But this is the sweet spot right here. The majority of my job is finding design problems and inefficiencies, thinking about how to improve them for users, and then building those solutions. And these days I'm thinking a lot about mobile. Mobile usage is exploding, and it redefines how people shop in retail and digital spaces. Understanding the difference between mobile and small screen strategies, native and web applications, and fixed versus responsive design is critical to creating joyous, profitable user experiences. This presentation compares the methods and tools available today, how they fit with customer needs, and the effect on your business strategy with respect to all devices. It's 2012, and e-commerce went mainstream 15 years ago, and it's still a huge opportunity that few businesses have fully capitalized. Total US online sales are estimated at $194 billion for 2011. And e-commerce can beat retail channels in key aspects of the shopping experience like selection, pricing, convenience, and service. It's still growing, but it's also changing shape. 5 years ago, no phones had the full web. They weren't very smart. 2 years ago, tablets were a laughable failure at best. They had bulky hardware and bloated software. Let's do a quick audience poll. Please raise your hand and keep it raised. Who owns an iPhone? Who's got an iPad, iPod Touch, Android phone, Android tablet, BlackBerry, Kindle, any other smart device? Windows phone too, thanks Tosh. We've got most of the hands in the room are up. Mobile isn't emerging. It's already here, it's ubiquitous, and it's not slowing down. Mobile devices are selling significantly faster than their desktop counterparts. Apple sold more iOS devices in 2011 than all the Macs it sold in the first 28 years combined. That's global. Let's look at a 24-hour span near the end of 2011. This is the number of children born, 371,000. In the same day, there were 378,000 iPhones sold. There were 184,000 other iOS devices, Android devices activated, Nokia smartphones, BlackBerries. That's 371,000 children versus 1.4 million new devices every day. 90% of the world lives within mobile network access today. And in 2013, Gartner's forecasting that mobile phones will overtake PCs as the most common web access device worldwide. And by 2016, Forrester is estimating 1 billion people will own smartphones. And of them, 350 million workers will use smartphones daily, and 200 million will take their own device to work. Mobile commerce is growing just as fast. 37% of US smartphone owners have purchased a product on their device in the last 6 months. Amazon's revenue from mobile devices was over $1 billion in 2010. PayPal's mobile payments topped $4 billion in 2011, and eBay's gross merchandise volume from mobile topped $5 billion last year, and 40% of their online transactions came from its one-year-old mobile app. So what is a mobile device? The landscape is becoming increasingly diverse. Now let's define some device classes to make sense of it. We have feature phones. This is basically everything pre-iPhone They had limited to no third-party apps. They had limited web browsers. They're often not graphical. They're still the most common device worldwide, though. Smartphones kind of started with BlackBerry, but really kicked off when the iPhone launched. There's tons running Android software now. You have Windows 7 Phone, BlackBerries, Nokia. You have portable media players like iPod Touches, Android-based media players that don't have phone capabilities. Sony PS Vitas, Nintendo DSs, they all have browsers on them. E-readers like Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble's Nook, and Sony readers. Tablets like iPad, Android-based devices, Kindle Fires, BlackBerry Playbooks, and HP touchpads. Then you get into computers like desktops, laptops, netbooks, and then other screens like internet-enabled TV, game consoles, refrigerators, and contact lenses, which the US Army just placed a big order for. It sounds complex, and it's tempting to generalize mobile as smartphones and tablets. If you cover them, your mobile strategy's in the bag, and that's not quite true. Mobile devices and platforms are extremely fragmented, with literally hundreds of variations, so you should start thinking about mobile as a spectrum rather than a set of distinct groups. One does not simply support mobile. Not with 10,000 developers could you do this. It is folly. So we know mobile matters, and now how do you define a strategy? Well, that depends if you need a small screen strategy or a mobile strategy. Small screen strategy is optimizing access for mobile device form factors. Small screen strategy is like Daisho in feudal Japan. Daisho is the pairing of long and short swords. Each sword is designed for a specific constraint. Taki are for open field battle on horseback, and Tanto are for close quarters combat on foot. They have different sizes, but they're for the same objective. Apply the Daisho principle to websites, and you have a small screen strategy. Taki is desktop access, and Tanto is small screen access. Together, they cover specific known needs. But don't assume your user's context or goals are identical on mobile devices. You should stop thinking about mobile as a small website on a tiny computer, because it's really a deeply embedded system of engagement, and that has really huge implications. Mobile strategy is not determined by user goals in a mobile context, and not solely on the device's size. So, for example, and I know Roy did one this morning that was very similar to this, but I didn't steal it from him. Let's say Mark walks into Megamart. An ideal application knows that he's bought baseball gear there in the past. When he passes by the sporting goods section, it notifies him about a new glove. There's only one left, and Mark scans the barcode and checks himself out. He can order one for his brother on the same transaction, and Megamart will deliver it. Mobile strategy enhances the shopping experience with new behaviors that are facilitated by a constant presence of mobile devices with advanced sensors. The technology is falling into place, but for some reason, we're not quite there yet. Instead, we have this most of the time. Keep in mind, the opposite is also true. Mobile devices are not always used in a mobile context. Only 6% of iPad sessions come from cellular networks, leaving 94% of access over Wi-Fi. You shouldn't be choosing between a small screen strategy and a mobile strategy, though. They aren't mutually exclusive. The best applications will draw strengths from both approaches. What can you build? Let's explore some options. Desktop website. You probably already have one of these. It's designed for laptops and desktops 1024 by 768 screens and up. The positives of it are it's a do-nothing strategy. Mobile browsers will scale it to fit the available width. Downsides are that creates a really bad user experience. It's hard to read, it's hard to interact with, constant pinch and zoom is required, and missteps are common because buttons are too small and too close. Mobile websites are similar. You traverse a hierarchy of pages with full page refreshes in between. This behaves like a desktop site, but the presentation is optimized for a specific device class. And typically, this is smartphones with grade A browsers like iPhone, Android, Nokia, BlackBerry, those. What's good about this is you have a really high opportunity for a good user experience. There's familiar development models and tools, and there's excellent platform support. For example, Magento can easily run multiple front ends from the same back-end installation. Negatives are mobile websites aren't a truly flexible solution. They're a one-device strategy, just like desktop sites. They exclude the majority of the device landscape still. Then you have mobile web apps. As of yesterday, Magento announced that they do have an HTML5 jQuery touch-based mobile app. This is a single-page model where the browser loads a container and then asynchronously sends requests to load additional content based on the user's requests. Twitter's mobile web app is a great example. You have a rich media and tailored experience. The asynchronous loading improves the apparent speed of the service, and again, it has familiar development tools. Downsides are it requires really tight platform integration, and that's probably why it's taken Magento a bit to get there. You can also be prone to bad assumptions about limiting functionality based on device size doesn't really work. Native apps are written for a specific mobile operating system. Magento Mobile has iOS and Android apps, or you could write custom apps, which is what larger e-tailers do, like Endless or REI, and they can have better usability than mobile web apps today. The downsides are, especially for custom ones, they're prohibitively expensive to develop for many devices. You also run into mismatch expectations because users get new devices, and if your app doesn't support it, then his perceived value of the device is lowered, and you might lose the sale. App stores are also middlemen between you and users. Their review processes can slow you down when you need to push updates, and exposure is hard. Getting in the featured or top 10 lists is extremely competitive. Native apps can also simply be a wrapper for a mobile web app. Twitter does this really well. You can see on the left they have their mobile app, and on the right is a native app running their mobile app in a container. Again, you have the same familiar development. You avoid deploying custom code for multiple operating systems, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to multiple native apps. Downsides are you're still producing sites for single device sizes, and long-term this thinking is unsustainable. These strategies are all incomplete. The mobile web is the only long-term, commercially viable content platform for mobile devices, but I'm not advocating mobile-specific sites. What we really need is an alternative approach. It's flexible, and it's ubiquitous, and it's called responsive web design. The web is like water. Water adapts to the shape of its container, and our design language and principles are derived from the canvas, which is a space with fixed dimensions. We imposed these on the web to exercise control and familiarity, but we did it against the web's nature. 12 years ago, John Alsop wrote a Tao of web design, suggesting that we should accept the ebb and flow of things. This rings truer today, because screens are getting smaller and larger simultaneously. Our artificial constraints are breaking the web rather than embracing its fluidity. Responsive web design is a philosophy and methodology to design a flexible web, not simply fluid for the container, but adaptive to the content and the user's context. It was delineated by Ethan Marcotte, and if I convince you of anything, you should read his treatise, Responsive Web Design. I'll give it a glancing summary here. The foundations of responsive design spring from three core elements: fluid grids, flexible images, and media queries. Let's start with fluid grids. The grid is a graphic design tool for creating layouts with consistent line space and rhythm. They originate from the content and are bound by the page's dimensions. On the web, you see grid frameworks in use every day without even realizing it. But as we've noted, the web is inherently flexible, and fixed width grids don't embrace this. So the first charge of responsive web design is constructing fluid grids. Let's start with a simple 960 pixel grid having 12 60-pixel columns and 20 pixel gutters. If we're designing a layout that has a main content area 620 pixels wide and a sidebar 300 pixels wide, our markup probably looks like this. Let's add some very basic CSS to get the layout shaped up. It's a pretty good start, but it's still rigid. We need to define our grid dimensions in relative terms to maintain the proportions of our design across differently sized browsers. Marcotte provides the formula, which is target divided by context equals result. Starting with the main class, the target width is 620 pixels. The context width is the parent container, which is 960 pixels. So we have 620 divided by 960 equals a really long decimal. We multiply that by 100 to get a percentage value. And then we compare this to the fixed and relative CSS. Notice that we're also changing the width on blog to a max width of 960 pixels to prevent the container from becoming awkwardly large. That's all you need to do to get fluid grid proportions working. Fluid grids work great for textual content, but what about images? On a narrow screen, they can easily overflow their container, which is poor form, but we can instruct the browser to flexibly scale images with one rule. If the image is too wide, this will scale it down to its parent container. Max width can be applied to many elements, including images, embed, object tags, and video. It's well supported in modern browsers, including i7 and up, but there are performance considerations that I'll touch on a bit later. By now you might be thinking that's just liquid layout, like what Wikipedia does, and it becomes really unusable at the extremes. But the glue in responsive web design is media queries. Media queries let us write conditional rules to control the inheritance, fallback, and redefinition of CSS. This is incredibly powerful. We can adjust a site's layout and style to create the best experience for whatever size the user's device is. Media queries use technology every front-end developer is familiar with, and they have widespread adoption in the latest browsers. They extend the media type functionality with expressions to match particular media features. I won't go into detail on every media feature, but many of them can use min and max prefixes to create ranges. Primarily, you'll be working with width, height, and device pixel ratio. The syntax is pretty straightforward, and it builds on CSS2 media types. It can also be referenced inline in a CSS file. In this example, I'm setting a font size of 14 pixels for all screen sizes. This is the first media query. It's actually the absence of a media query, but what that lets us do is intelligently define the baseline styles that exist for all dimensions without any layout. If the screen is larger than 480 pixels and the later 1024, the font size will bump up. Browsers re-render the layout instantly as the viewport changes size. By default, smartphones and tablets will scale down websites that are wider than the screen's device width value. Pinching and zooming requires extra effort, and this isn't ideal. So we can set a baseline viewport for these devices that prevents them from scaling. For example, on the iPhone 4S, this changes the viewport width from 980 pixels to 320 pixels and lets us easily use width-based media queries to alter layout. Browser and mobile device support is good, but it still presents some problems for older versions of Internet Explorer. Thankfully, there are some JS polyfills. Respond.js is a fast and lightweight polyfill for min-max media queries only that works in IE 6 to 8. This is what I use in most projects because it covers the primary use cases and it's really fast, almost unnoticeably. A more robust but heftier solution is CSS3 media queries. In the e-commerce world, mobile almost always comes after the desktop site. It's not necessarily an afterthought, but desktop has been the dominant access method for a long time. So a lot of major enterprises are invested and entrenched in their desktop site. If you're building a responsive site, then scaling down your desktop site is a big mistake. You should be thinking mobile first. It's a methodology put forth by Luke Wroblewski suggesting that experiences should start at the mobile scale and ramp up to bigger, more capable devices. Like Marcotte, he's written a book on the subject which is worth every penny. I highly recommend it. I wager everyone in this room has a dozen competitors whose website has feature and content parity, and that makes it really hard to stand out. By comparison, good mobile experiences are far and few between. Mobile is manifest destiny for the digital landscape right now. You need to stake a claim before the frontier is settled. Mobile first means embracing the constraints of a small screen. Think about the must-haves of a desktop e-commerce experience. You have prominent branding, multi-tiered navigation, search, account links, sidebars, Facebook widgets, and now you need to squeeze all of that into 6 square inches. And we didn't actually talk about any actual content yet. There's the product names, photography descriptions, reviews, related items, and the call to actions to actually purchase the things. Big screens have made us lazy in a way, and we've kind of caved in by making sites that are an assault on users' senses. Designing for the mobile experience first narrows your focus and prioritizes user needs. Context in which mobile devices are used is much more varied than traditional computers. The new capabilities and sensors native to these devices enable innovative experiences not possible or relevant to desktops. When's the last time you pulled out your laptop in the grocery store? In development, applying the mobile-first methodology to responsive design is logical, and it produces more maintainable code. Starting with a simple semantic markup in CSS can lead to a clean foundation for progressive enhancement and can help you design better desktop sites. So what does it actually look like? Responsive design is hard to demonstrate without a few devices or at least a browser to resize. The following examples show screenshots of sites at various breakpoints to demonstrate their adaptation to the available space. This first section uses designs that utilize the full gamut of responsive techniques. This is Ethan Marcotte's canonical example from May 2010. The Boston Globe was one of the first high-profile sites to fully embrace the techniques. Obama does it on his campaign website. Online publishers are doing it. And there are hundreds of examples cataloged at the Media Queries site that you can check out. Adaptive sites use media queries to adjust layout at specific breakpoints, but they aren't necessarily 100% fluid in between those breakpoints. So 8 Famouses is a limited run book publisher that uses an adaptive layout. Cisco's site for the London 2012 Olympics is also adaptive. There are surprisingly few examples of e-commerce sites utilizing responsive design, though. A few responsive themes for platforms like Shopify, OpenCart, and WordPress e-commerce are popping up, but they're not exemplary of the approach's potential. Several bespoke implementations are heading in the right direction, though. Nuts.com has a deep catalog and information architecture, but it doesn't require separate mobile sites or tablet sites. The content reacts to the viewport size and adapts to fit best. It's one of the few complex implementations of responsive e-commerce currently. The first wave will more likely be small shops, like Where You Belong, with limited amounts of content and subsets of functionality. So why haven't major brands published responsive storefronts? It's really complicated. Combining mobile and responsive is disruptive in the first place. The issue is bigger than websites and apps. The minute customers started carrying the internet in their pocket, retailing became exponentially more competitive and multifaceted. So organizational structures and business practices need to adapt to reflect the new environment. The mobile-first responsive approach requires a major reinvestment on the front-end systems using modern techniques. Likewise, re-architecting content entrenched in legacy infrastructure is expensive and difficult. New enterprises have a significant advantage in starting fresh, and this is where responsive design will appear first for e-commerce. Navigating these strategic constraints is not only complex, but it usually requires a C-suite champion to push through. Technology partners need to adapt too. Many e-commerce agencies are factories. Salesmen, project managers, designers, and engineers work in silos, and they pass the project down the line. The process isn't structured for cross-functional teams, exploration, prototyping, or iterative design and development. Smaller, agile teams are best equipped to find the vision and execute the processes that responsive design requires. So I'm going to do a little demo here. Skinny Ties is a company that I've been working on a major branding and design realignment with for about a year. We're about 80% complete, but I'd like to show you a functional prototype that's running on Magento that's fully responsive. Sorry, this is a little weird looking backwards. So the projector resolution is a little different. I can't show you what the larger size is, but basically this is about the Kindle Fire range and downward. You can see if we get a little bigger, it'll expand to show navigation up top. But as the layout's scaling down and adapting, it's changing proportions to best suit the available screen space. And that's opened up, but if this is basically what you'd see on an iPhone. You can still access all the same content, what's in your cart, if you want to do a search, if you want to look at different search and filtering options, images, descriptions, ways to add to the cart, and then more contextual data. And all these interactions have to be optimized to work both with mouse events and also touch events. I'm not going to rely on the internet activity, so I'm just going to go through how this will work if you were to complete a checkout flow. This is what the cart looks like. It's kind of difficult dealing with tables because they don't like to be linearized, but there's some nice ways you can deal with it, so all the information will scale and adapt. And checkout works the same way. As the screen space increases, you can realign the form to best fit and demonstrate what people need to do to get to the next step. There is no perfect toolkit, though. You'll need a myriad of approaches for different projects. These are kickstarters to get you off on the right foot. FitText is a plugin for scaling text. Likewise, FitVid is a plugin for maintaining proportion of scaled videos. jQuery AnyStretch is a plugin to dynamically resize background images. Devices like iPhone 4, 4S, iPad 3, and some of the newer Android phones have high-resolution displays that are more than double the pixel density of computer displays. So to serve crisp images, your assets need to be 2x or 1.5x, depending on the platform. And this can have a big impact on performance that I mentioned earlier. You don't want an iPhone user to wait for 3 megabytes of product photos to download over a 3G connection, and you don't want a desktop user to download larger assets than their hardware can display. So there are several approaches to managing this. Retina.js sort of mimics Apple's approach of downloading the smallest usable image first. In the background, the script will start downloading a high-res asset in the background after the page is finished loading. They're swapped in as soon as they're ready. So in total bandwidth, this technique is expensive, but the perceived speed is fast because the users aren't waiting on large assets. They're getting the small stuff first, and they can navigate the page. Adaptive Images uses a server-side callback to determine the screen size, then scale, cache, and deliver the appropriately sized asset. Neither of these methods is perfect yet. There isn't a standard, reliable method for designating alternate resolutions in markup, but a proposal is being primed for W3C review. You need to test on real devices. You should buy a tablet or two, get a cheap Android phone. There's no substitute or emulator that can simulate the dexterity of touch events. Responsive IS is a browser tool you can use, and it's one of my go-to tools for testing at common device breakpoints. Matt Kersley built an iframe previewer that's similar, and ScreenFly is like Responsive IS on steroids. It has profiles for dozens of different devices. Aptus is a Mac app designed specifically for responsive testing. It lets you define your own breakpoints and quickly scale to them. Preprocessors enable a superset of CSS with features like variables and functions. They drastically reduce the effort in using vendor prefixed properties and help you write more flexible, readable style sheets. Less is a library that can run on the client or server side. Sass is an alternate, and it's my weapon of choice because it uses the open source Compass framework on top of it. Compass is basically a bundle of shortcuts and predefined mix-ins that make authoring complex CSS simpler, specifically for responsive designs. Responsive frameworks are a good way to wet your feet. They can provide markup, reusable design patterns, and generic examples to learn from. For example, HTML5 mobile boilerplate, 320 and up, Twitter Bootstrap, and Skeleton. Responsive grids frameworks serve the same purpose, like LESS, 1140 CSS Grid. GridPack's a tool for generating your own grids, and GridSet's another one for making compound or more advanced grids. There are some common traps in responsive mobile thinking. Content from multiple contexts is the same, which isn't true. I can't tell you that users want X on smartphones and they want Y on desktops. And you can't guess it or you can't copy it from your competitors. You need to use your analytics data and user testing because those are invaluable and inexpensive tools to uncover how people use your site. The cost per kilobyte to the user is minimal or non-existent. That's not true. Over 3G, mobile websites frequently take over 10 seconds to load, so front-end optimization is critical. You need to compress, cache, and modularize resources whenever possible, and use tools like YSlow to grade performance and identify weaknesses. Minimizing HTTP requests and using a CDN can significantly reduce load times. Persistent and high-speed network access is available. Even with highly performant websites, we've all experienced dead zones and reverting to 2G networks. Quality and strength of cellular connections can vary wildly. Some new HTML5 APIs can provide relief through offline web applications, web storage, and index databases. Mobile browsers are smart and will support the same standards consistently. WebKit dominates iOS and Android, but it's not the only mobile browser. We have Opera Mobile, Firefox Mobile, Windows Phone 7, IE9, BlackBerry's browser, and they're all in the wild right now. Even within WebKit, standards are still evolving. When the iPad launched, it supported the orientation media query, but the iPhone didn't get that until a few months later. Technology comes before user needs. This is a thorny area, and it's getting more complex, so it's tempting to buy into a solution provider's package and throw technology at users. Don't do this. You need to start with user goals and then work backwards. You'll discover mistakes faster, and you'll create better experiences. When designing for small screens, be prepared to validate every assumption you've made about your desktop website. Scaling the complex information architecture of e-commerce websites to small screens can be challenging. Always lead with content rather than navigation. The browser Chrome, your navigation, search, and account info eat up a lot of valuable screen space. Collapse them using overlays or show the site's architecture in the footer so users see content first. Touch targets need to be large. They need to be easy to see and easy to tap. Compared to normal web buttons on mobile devices, they may seem toy-like. You need to test on real devices to get a feel for how these actually work. iOS Human Interface Guidelines suggest a minimum button size of 44 pixels. The iPhone's keyboard breaks this suggestion, but it's out of necessity. The practical minimum size for any tap target is 44 by 30. As long as at least one dimension hits the minimum value, it'll still be pretty usable. But keep in mind that tighter spacing requires bigger buttons to prevent mistaps. If possible, try to separate alternative actions to reduce mistaps. Tablets fill an odd space right now. They're significantly smaller than desktop screens, but they often have comparable or greater screen resolutions. 10-inch tablets like the iPad usually work great with desktop scale sites. But 6 to 8-inch tablets like the Kindle Fire straddle the line between mobile and desktop scale, and that presents awkward user experiences. Mobile designs tend to look huge on them, and while desktop sites are crunched too much for comfort, yet they're strong enough to provide good usability for non-linearized content when some care is given to designing for that form factor. Follow user-centered design principles. Never limit the user's capability based on their device. Context isn't determined by the device. Context is based on actions. Actions stem from goals. Goals are a manifestation of needs, and needs are the root of a user's context. Website content should be published once, and devices should be smart enough to know what to render. Adaptive content is a real solution to device-centric experiences. One web means, as far as is reasonable, you have the same information and services available to users irrespective of the device they're using. However, it does not mean that exactly the same information is available in exactly the same representation across those devices. Think about what users need and expect. Why do we offer guest checkout? It's because signing up for an account isn't necessary. It delays the first transaction. What's your TPS? Not Lumberg's TPS. TPS is time pre-shopping. For a native app, users have a 3-minute delay before they can start shopping. They have to hit the app store, find it, authenticate, go through a whole download cycle, install, and then they can browse. For a website, their delay is 3 seconds. Mobile commerce has expectations rooted in e-commerce. Users shouldn't need another account to make a purchase, and they shouldn't need an app to make a purchase. Delivering the app is a barrier. Delivering app updates is a barrier. Apps increase friction in a way that you can't negate. The web has continuous deployment baked in. It's not a strength you want to give up, and you can deliver comparable experiences using standardized web technologies. Be future-friendly. This is Jacob Nielsen. He's been writing about web usability for 17 years, and Business Week has called him one of the world's most influential designers. He says mobile apps currently have better usability than mobile sites. But mobile sites will win over mobile apps in the long term. The reason for that is because expenses increase rapidly when you start developing for more platforms, to the point where the minimal return on investment makes further development unsustainable for new platforms. The web is one platform, and it benefits from full integration with the rest of the web. Please raise your hand and keep it raised if any of these apply to you. You send email to customers, you participate in social media, you optimize for search engines, or you advertise online. Actually, never mind. Raise your hand if you do none of those things. There's no hands. Links don't open apps. The predominant marketing efforts are based on links. It doesn't matter what device you're using, links open the web. The only native application that matters is the browser. And anyone who's betting against the web right now is an idiot. So let's put it all together into a strategy you can act on. Start with your business goals. How can a mobile presence help you achieve them? Will it improve your current reach? Will it open up new opportunities? Study your users and talk to them. How do they use mobile devices? What tasks do they perform? When do they use mobile versus tablet versus desktop? Where do they use them? What info is most valuable to them, and what influences their decisions? Define your target device classes. Use your analytics data to determine which device classes matter to your business and set the baseline experience you want to deliver. Progressively enhance and iterate from there. The latest and greatest device is not necessarily the most relevant. Don't be afraid to abandon legacy browsers either. Your return may be higher from devoting resources to the sum of growing devices than by supporting a single old browser. Study and leverage the best practices. Some of your competitors are already active in mobile. Explore what has been done and identify where they're failing. Look outside the industry for innovation at big and small companies. Identify what their users are accustomed to and how you can clarify and make the experience unique. Simplify the tasks, but don't limit features. Mobile behavior includes frequent short dips, but also long, sustained dives. Focus on removing barriers and distractions so people can get in and out easily, but also have a reason to stay. Drive this thinking back to the large screen experiences. Don't assume you know the user's context. Start with user goals and work backwards. You'll uncover assumptions faster, avoid costly mistakes and rewrites, and create better experiences. Again, test on real devices. Resizing browsers and running device emulators aren't an effective stand-in or representative of touch and gesture interfaces. Engage designers and engineers in your strategic decisions. They're experts in user experience, information architecture, usability, interaction design, performance, and optimization. And delivering responsive design requires a lattice work of ideas and collaboration across disciplines. Leave the silos and titles at the door. Think future-friendly. Initially, everyone's going to struggle to adapt to new processes, workflows, and methodologies. But don't settle for an outmoded strategy that aims for a new sliver. Responsive design can be the whole pie. I want to thank Magento for inviting me to speak, and thank everyone for listening and making the conference a pleasure to attend.